live streaming is on.
We do not.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone. Live streaming is going. Have a great time.
This is a 2-minute warning, guys. Just to let you know, we'll be starting in 2 minutes. Okay, it is 5:05. Hi, Jared. Hi, Jasmine.
Hi.
Welcome. First off, let me say congratulations to both of you for reaching the gold medal round of the National Online Forensics Festival. Congratulations to both of you. Is there any questions you'd like to ask the judges before we get started?
Nope, I don't think so.
Yeah, none here.
Fantastic. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave it to you guys, as you probably have been the whole time, to time yourselves. If for some reason there's any problems with us hearing you audio-wise, we will try to make a signal or let you know. But otherwise, I'm hoping everything should go as it has so far.
Okay.
Affirmative. Whenever you're ready.
I know I have like the red bar right now. Can you still hear me okay? And
Yeah, it's only the video. This is a little bit. Yeah, but your voice sounds fine.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so 5-minute speech.
Yes.
5-minute speech. I will request all other individuals to please mute your mics while she's speaking, just to make sure we don't have background noise. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. As someone during prep time that got about 3 Tinder notifications and has a tattoo that quotes Pride and Prejudice on her body, I will say that I have never been in love, but I really do believe in it. And I think that gets at the core of this topic, where I stand in the strong affirmation that this house believes in a thing called love, because it's not necessarily about knowing that I've experienced love or someone else has experienced love, but about the belief in love that makes a difference. So let's start out with some definitions. This house being human beings, thing meaning existence, believes meaning accepts as true, and love, according to Oxford Dictionary, as an intense feeling of deep affection. The type of this round is going to be a fact debate, and the weighing mechanism is going to be preponderance of evidence. So whoever that can prove to you in the most amount of evidence that love does or does not exist in belief will win this round. I'm going to prove in 2 ways that the affirmative should win. And that's first in proof that love does exist, and second in the faith that human beings hold that love does exist. So let's go into the first contentions, that love does exist scientifically. So first of all, let's go to romantic love. In 166 societies, there was evidence found of romantic love in about 147 of them, and this was kept alive mainly by a biological nature. This is an intense craving to be with a person, a particular person, not just sexually, but also emotionally. In neuroscience, we've seen that love is an addicting high. It actually produces an entirely different state of being. For example, some neural pathways, such as cocaine, are similarly lit up as if you were in love. The prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of logic and reasoning, as well as the amygdala, which is in charge of warning against threats, all work less when you're in love, really showing that love puts you in an entirely different mental space. And here's why that's important, because we see that even through neuroscience that love and lust are separate neural response pathways. So when we're talking about this thing about something that we believe in, when we believe in a concept such as someone that's being drunk, it's a state of altered consciousness. It's a state of being. The same thing occurs in love scientifically. It's a different state of consciousness that does actually have physical proof to its existence. We can see this through like the flood of hormones that happens to a mother who just recently gives birth. So let's go into the second contention of non-rationality. What does love make people do? Further providing evidence that love does exist and this house does believe in love. So as human beings, everything should be, hypothetically, as rational people, a cost-benefit analysis. But why do we see that not happening? The reason for that is because of something called altruism, and that's the concern for happiness of other human beings. So for example, when a father goes to prison falsely pretending that he was the person that committed an act, whereas it was really his son, that's an example of altruism. We can see something similar in the LGBTQIA+ community. For example, in Iran, there's this couple named Rumi and Hafiz, and basically flogging is a punishment for gay love in Iran. But what happened is that they didn't hide their love and they were willing to come out with that love despite the consequences. So rationally, love shouldn't make sense. But when it comes to altruism and when it comes to actually wanting to have those emotions, people end up preferring love to rationality. Further, we can look toward the idea of philosophy, which is a love for knowledge. Socrates himself is known for dying because he stood up for his beliefs, not wanting to just survive for the purpose of surviving, but the fact that when his beliefs weren't accepted, he still stood by them, didn't back down there. We can also see an example for love for country. That's another type of love, a passion, intense feeling of deep affection. We can look toward Nathan Hale. During the Revolutionary War, he said, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." When people are willing to give up their most precious asset, which is their life, for love, either of another person or of another entity, that truly does prove that people believe in love. But let's go to the third aspect, and that's the general belief in love as a whole. People without experiencing it can still believe in love. Same thing happens with their belief in religion, right? So just because someone, has never talked to God before, because let's say they weren't Jesus, they can still believe in love. Like everyone has different opinions there, but people generally have the ability to believe there. But let's look at the evidence. In December 2019, there was a survey published that 94% of the United States believes in love. A 2006 to 2007 Gallup poll tells us in 136 countries, 70% of the world population said they experienced love in the past day. There is 100% evidence backing up that not only does love exist, but love is believed in, both due to its physiological impacts that it has on people, but also the mental belief that people just have in it. So myself is the prime example. I've never experienced love, but I truly do believe in it, and that's something that I stand by every day. And I think a lot of people have a similar feeling that they believe in. So ultimately, it comes down to the evidence, and we see that the preponderance of evidence really does prove the affirmative side. Thank you.
Thank you. Cross-X?
All right, judges ready? Opponent ready?
Mm-hmm.
So starting now, so can you tell me again, what do you define love as?
Sure. So Oxford Dictionary defines it as an intense feeling of deep affection.
So you're telling me that all love is just having an affection for something?
It's an intense feeling of deep affection, but I particularly give you like the neural pathways that are changed when we look at true.
So are you telling me that in order to win the round, I have to prove that people are incapable of having deep level of affections for things?
I'm telling you that you need to prove, well, there are perfectly like different studies that argue against love, but you need to prove to me that like those particular neural pathways don't light up differently because of love than just I regularly liking someone.
Additionally, what did you define thing as?
Thing is defined as existence according to Oxford
So
Dictionary.
existence. So wouldn't that mean that for love to exist, it needs to be its own entity?
I would disagree. I think things like happiness exist, right?
Well, if love only exists if love is only between a person and the thing that they have a deep affection for, doesn't that mean that love doesn't exist? It only exists in the relationship and not as its own entity?
It doesn't need to exist as its own entity, but like, okay, tell me something that exists, right? So happiness exists, knowledge exists, belief exists. All of those things you can't just like discard. It can't just be like physical material objects. It can be a subject in thought.
But where does belief exist exactly? Like, how does it exist?
In your brain.
Additionally, for love to exist, for you to believe in love, would you say that you would have to prove that love actually does indeed have an influence on the world of human affairs and society?
I think that's a natural effect, but I don't think it's necessary. So, for example, like happiness can exist, but it may not lead to nuclear war, and that's okay.
All right, thank you. That'll be all.
Okay.
All right, so this speech is 6 minutes? All right, thank you. Judges ready? Opponent ready? Starting now. So before I begin, my name is Jared Cook, and today we're pondering the issue of love. Now, I will confess, I'm somebody who has Tinder on my phone. It's remained deafeningly silent, so I might be a little bit more of a cynic. Now, today's resolution is this House believes in a thing called the love. Now, we could obviously just talk about love just in a sort of those like Hallmark card terms, Valentine's Day, the thing you get on the little candies. Love is a thing, love is passion, love is love for country, love for the library, love for video games, just like love for like little like Funko Pop figurines you buy at the store. But I believe that this is disingenuous to the form of debate, because love isn't just a deep affection for something. Love has a connotative value, a positive nature. People believe that love is fundamentally good. People associate with God a divine love, a brotherhood of man. It's not just a deep affection. Because even though my opponent has explicitly stated, we can assume that if we can show a deep love for racism, bigotry, for fascist governments, for beliefs in anything, essentially she's created a definition that incorporates any expression of deep affections, which I believe is fundamentally unfair to me, because it is undeniable that humans experience deep affections for things, be it knowledge, literature, like any experience. That gives me no room in the debate to actually disprove that, because it's a fundamental nature of human existence. The way you could show love in a different manner, not just as a matter of being, is showing that love is an ideology, showing that love is a principle that actually informs people's actions. For this, I'm going to provide an alternative definition for love. I'm going to define love as a love for your fellow man, an ideology, this sort of collective good, a belief in collective good, and that has a overwhelming power in society. I'm also going to call into a question thing. So today, in this round, I'm going to bring up numerous topics. I'm going to bring up the fact that the only way you can believe in a thing called love is if you isolate the thing and you know definitively what the thing is. So basically, if I can show to you that love cannot be defined due to the numerous cultural examples of love that differ from many core centralized topics, sort of a postmodern interpretation of love, she should lose the round today. If I can show you that love is completely ineffectual and it only exists in relationships and it has no existence outside of those relationships, I would argue that love is not a thing, it is a experience. And I'll go in deeper into that, and how non-tangible like ideas can be things, while other non-tangible ideas can only be experiences. And then finally, I'm going to prove to you that fundamentally we cannot judge love living in an American society. We have so many like cultural biases that like identify love as a purely monogamous marriage type relationship, that until she addresses that critique, until she addresses the fact that living in America and having discussion about love obfuscates its true nature, then we cannot actually have any true identity of what love is. Now I'm going to go into my first critique, basically the fundamental idea that we cannot know necessarily what love is. Now, when we consider love in America, my opponent said that many people in America believe in love, but they also believe that love is majority like a monogamous marriage between two individuals under the Christian faith. Essentially, that is how love is contextually defined in America. That's how many people consider and experience love. And you'll see numerous sources that many people actually believe that a monogamous marriage is one of the only true manifestations of love. You go to another country such as Indonesia or Native American cultures where they have an entirely different system of love that doesn't have marriage, that doesn't have relationships that many Americans can even comprehend. It's things that average Americans would not identify as love, yet they consider it to be love. What this means is that there's no shared unified experience of love, and cultural relativism, or basically the idea that our Western experience of love is not the defining feature of love, shows that it cannot be pinpointed. Because we cannot just call love a deep affection because it manifests in different forms, we cannot actually solve this debate, because the debate explicitly says a thing, a specific thing, a specific definition of love. And as I've established, I believe that love is a little bit more than a deep affection for something. It has connotations attached. Unless we can show a universal experience of how we act upon love, then I don't believe we can win the round today. Now, when I was on cross-examination, I asked, is love a thing that exists, as sort of a platonic form, this sort of like concept in space, or does it only exist in relationships? Now, all my opponents' arguments about sort of the neurological response to love are irrelevant, because that still means that love is not a thing that exists. It's not an ideology. It's merely an experience, something that has no tangible reality, either philosophically or physically. Meanwhile, something that does have a tangible reality is philosophy, capitalism, like socialism, things that actually inform people's actions, things that exist outside of individuals and hold the overwhelming sway of the world we exist in today. I would argue that when you look at ideologies such as religion, something that is like notoriously as intangible as love, it has a more direct impact on politics and people's lives, thus showing it's a thing that exists and not just an experience, than love does. I would also draw your attention to philosophers. Many philosophers postulate on what motivates people's actions, and very few say it's love. Thomas Hobbes especially, says that man's life is a state of essentially violence, of war, of conflict, that even love is not so much love as it is a desire for conquest, and that's why he needs a government to control him. That ideology has more manifestation in real life and governmental politics than this idea that you can have a governmental politics based on love and affection. The closest thing we've ever had to a social movement dedicated to love would be the hippie movement. And as we've seen since the 1960s, there aren't that many hippies wandering around the streets these days. It fizzled out because it lacked any tangible staying reality. It was not a thing. Love is not something that can exist as a thing. At best, is an experience, and it's a relationship between two items, but it's not a thing in and of itself. So essentially, I've proven that on a philosophical level, in a postmodern world, we cannot have a single definition for love, and therefore it's impossible to solve this debate, meaning the opposition wins. I've also showed to you that love as an ideology does not compel anybody on a significant enough level to be considered something that exists. Love is just simply not something that compels people's actions on a large scale, as opposed to other intangible ideas such as hate, bigotry, conquest. Therefore, it is not a thing. And I believe for all of these reasons, we can concur that love is not something that exists as a thing, but it is merely a relationship or a naive dream. Thank you.
Awesome. Ready for cross-ex?
Yes.
Great. So what is religion?
So that's a question. I'd say religion is a set of like guiding like ideologies or principles that just like have, they traditionally include like creation stories, the knowledge of like how the world came to be. It's sort of a shared tradition.
Do you think that people believe in religion? Or like
I do think people believe in religion, and that name belief means they treat it as an ideology, not just this like monolithic item.
Would you consider religion a thing?
Yes, I would consider religion a thing because it directly informs people's actions, and it has a identifiable, tangible identity because it's Christianity, religion, like Islam. Well, love is not really a thing.
So you're addressing a thing as in something. It could be something that doesn't like physically have like a material to it.
Oh yeah, yes, but it exists outside of relationships. Outside of any individual person, religion exists. Meanwhile, love requires a relationship between two things that exist, but it itself is not a thing.
Okay, so would you consider a relationship between a person and God to not be a relationship?
Well, I mean, I think that if you were going to prove that love exists, you would actually need to bring up God. Many philosophers said that God is a divinely like loving being and that he actually put love into the world and gave it to human beings, but you have not. You've merely defined it as a neurological like reaction or just experience.
Right, no, but it's still like your argument is that it's something that's like tangible, right? Has a tangible impact. So would you say
yes, religion does.
Religion does. What about like the physiological pathways that change, like people having a physical change to their body. Like, is that not a tangible impact? Like, let's go into women.
I would say that's something that is done to me. That's not a thing that exists.
What? I don't understand.
So basically, the physiological reaction to love is love like becoming a part of the individual. It's not love as a thing. It is love doing something to someone. So essentially, love does not exist on its own. It exists only into relationship of the person. So it has no independent existence of its own.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Awesome. So that's a few minutes each from you.
Yes.
Okay, great. We're just going to start top of case. I'm going to go through my minutes, and then I'm going to like rehash what I said because that wasn't really touched. Okay. Cool. So let's understand this basic difference. So my opponent tells you that love is different from religion. There's like this whole understanding he has, first of all, that we can't have the same love as, like, everyone in different countries has a different form of love. So let's go back to the polls that I cited in my third contention that went untouched, that basically said in 136 countries that were surveyed over a year, 70% of the world's population believed or said they experienced love in some form of way, right? So there are different conceptions of love, but when it comes down to the neural pathways that are impacted, those are the same neural pathways in different cultures, meaning that it's not like something that we're totally different in the Western world, right? Like my parents loving them, they're like each other from a Middle Eastern country is the same thing as like two parents here loving each other in like an American country, right? It's just like different places have the same experience, same way that different human beings breathe the same way, right? Okay, so then we can go into just like this idea of tangibility. So it's this idea that like something can only be a thing if it has tangible impact. That's the main crux of the negative argument. Here's the issue there, because love does have a tangible impact. People willingly go into contracts to like literally live with another human being for their entire life, right? That's one thing they do. I tell you examples of people killing themselves over love, people willing to risk themselves, throw out all cost-benefit analysis over love. And that's the thing, it does have a tangible impact. So then we go into the idea of religion, where we sort of basically end up comparing them. They're the same thing, but he argues that there's an independent existence to religion. I'm going to disagree to that. I think that religion is an idea. I don't think that, I personally don't believe that like God is a material being and could exist personally. And I think that's just a thought that people have among themselves. It's once again a relationship in their heads, and the same thing with religion, right? Or it's the same thing with love. So I really do think that, first of all, tangible impacts have been proven, and he needs to give you an example of how a tangible impact doesn't exist. On the point of ground, he still does have ground. Once again, go back to the topic. The way that I defined it is that you need to believe, people believe in love, and I proved to you that people do actually tell us that they believe in love, right? And there's scientific pathways that prove that. If he wanted to, he could have gone through polls, shown how many people don't believe in love, how many people hate love on Valentine's Day, shown that the scientific pathways aren't true. That's all things that he could have done, but instead, he's trying to argue on this small thing of the word thing. First of all, thing itself is an arbitrary statement. We can't define it very specifically, but I've already given you an example of that, and that's existence, right? So we know that love does have an existence in a material form through our brains, the way that it like impacts us. So let's go back to my own contentions. Love does exist scientifically. I've proven that. Let's go to like women. When they give birth to a child, they have a flood of hormones, and that leads to like obsessive compulsive behaviors over their child. There is physical proof of love existing, and that's how we as a human race have survived through all of time. Second, non-rationality. And third, we prove that there's a belief in love among people. So my opponent needs to address these before, instead of just touching on framework the entire time. Thank you.
Okay. 5 minutes, right? Okay. Judge ready? Opponent ready? Starting now. So tragically, I have to inform you all that love is not a thing. I know this may seem cynical, nihilistic, like I watched the show Rick and Morty, but ultimately there has not been enough evidence. There's not been enough proof to show that love is not merely an experience, but a tangible thing. Now let's go into my opponent's arguments. So one, she states that 70% of people say they've experienced or like they believe in or experienced love. Now one, I like to point to the word experience. They've experienced love. I never denied that you can't experience love or that love doesn't necessarily exist, but for love to be a thing, it has to exist separate of the relationship between a person and an actual thing. Now let's think about it. If you have a love between a person and a dog, the person and the dog generate the love, but the love does not exist. Merely the love is in the person and the dog. There is no entity of love between them. There is no separate concept of love. The love only exists in the experience of it. It has no existence in it of its own. This philosophical difference has not been explained. It's not been justified away. There's been nothing given on this subject. Now let's go back to the issue of ground. My opponent said she's given me ground because allegedly some people don't believe in love. But the way my opponent has defined love is not as an ideology, not as a belief, in true love even, which would have given me more ground, but she explicitly said a deep affection for something, a deep affection for anything. So if she can show that every human being in existence has had a deep experience, like affection for something, which is a basic state of the human condition, then she wins the round. And that's not something anybody can contradict under that definition of love, the physiological response, because everybody has affection for at least something in their lives. Under that definition, no matter how she tries to obfuscate it, she explicitly stated that love is a thing because it's people having deep affection for something. If she wants to talk about true love or love as an idea and people believing in it as an ideology, perhaps the ideology of brotherhood of man, of people getting along together, of peace and prosperity, the things that people actually associate with love outside of that physiological response and the affection, which in the abstract means nothing, then that would be a fair debate. But because she's not doing that, this not only shows that she set up a debate that was designed to be essentially impossible for me to disprove, but it also shows the intangibility of love as an entity. Now, just to show you other intangible things that are entity, a philosopher, Slavoj Žižek, talks about this concept of ideology. He essentially holds that ideology as something that exists, that is interacted with. And even though you can't touch it, even though you can't see it, it's something that informs people's actions. And that is because of the collective worth given to it. It's complex. It has a name. You can point to ideologies, capitalism, socialism, but love is not an ideology. Love is not something that informs people's actions. It's merely experience. My opponent says some people kill themselves over love. And if you read Romeo and Juliet, Romeo would say he died in the name of love, but I would say he died over a case of gaslighting. Ultimately, love is not the reason he did that. He might have experienced love for Juliet, but love did not compel him to kill himself. It was external factors that did not necessarily connect to love, because love is not an ideology. Love is merely an experience that has no existence outside of the relationship between two individuals. Now, also, assuming you disregard all of that, the one critique that I think it does prove that you cannot have a definition for love, because she does need a singular universal definition for love if it's a thing, an individual thing in the resolution, is the fact that there is things that people would consider love in other countries that we here would not even recognize as love. Let's think about China. Like when people stand up and salute for the Chinese national anthem, many people in America, the prevailing opinion is that it's not love for their country, it's brainwashing, it's them being manipulated, it's them having no will of their own. The fundamental nature is because we can't show a universal experience in all countries of people actually having love as an ideology, not just a physiological response, we cannot prove that love is a universal, because we can't even agree if something is a display of love or manipulation. Is love something that you actually have control over? Do you need free will to be in love? My opponent offers nothing of this. All she offers is a deep affection for something which means nothing. It has no tangibility in of its own. It doesn't give me any ground. It doesn't have any relevance to the real world, because every single person in existence has had a deep affection for something, because that's the human condition. So ultimately, in this round, I think you're going to be voting on a couple things. So one, the intangibility of love. Do you truly believe that love has any existence outside of the relationship between two things, meaning that love itself is not a thing? It only comes into being in the experience of two things that actually do exist. And it's a little bit of a semantic definition, but I do believe it's important in this instance because there are intangible things that do exist. Do you believe it's possible in this world of postmodernism and the hyperpolarization that we could ever have a singular definition of love? I do not believe this is the case. Do you believe that love as an ideology, which I expected the round to be over, is actually more influential than other ideologies that actually compel people's actions? As you can see, the hippies no longer exist. It did not have any staying power. It was not a thing in that context. For these reasons, I urge an opposition ballot today. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Let's begin. I still stand on the proud affirmation of the topic. So let's go into the actual voter issues of this round and just how we've come down to define things. So first of all, my opponent tells you that there is no tangibility of love. Love is not a thing because it's not a tangible thing. Yet he tells you that religion is a tangible thing, right? So there's a really like contradictory statement happening in the first place. So he tells you that I cannot be proposing my definition of love. It doesn't make sense. But then he says that it should be a belief in a fundamental good, which he doesn't prove anything under his own definition on his own case. So we have to go with my definition because there has been no counter definition proposed, right? If there were, then I could at least have some ground to debate against him, but I can't just debate against like a brick wall. So then we go into the actual topic of like, can it be a tangible thing? So in terms of religion, that's a relationship you have with God. Same thing, love can be a relationship you have with another person. But the difference here is that we have physiological evidence, neurological evidence that love does make an impact on the brain. So if we're talking about the way that he defines based on philosophers what an ideology is, something that you can't touch, can't see, if I pulled up your brain on a scanner like an fMRI machine, I could see if you were in love or not based on if you looked at a person. So therefore, we can see it. Therefore, it is not an ideology, right? There is an existence to love. If that comes out in the form of like a physical, like, map or something like that, that does count as a form of existence of love because we have proof of it existing. And then we go into the topic of just like, is it international? He says like there are like the people that salute China's flag or the people in the US don't think that's the same form of love. Yes, love is subjective. There are plenty of things that are subjective. Same with patriotism, same with hatred. Everyone has a subjective opinion of something, but I presented a definition in this round and you can look towards the general statistics that prove to you that people do believe in a thing called love. Right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be the same definition of love, but people have belief in a form of love, and I've proven evidence behind that. So let's really understand what's the debate coming down to at the end of it. So weighing mechanism for this round was preponderance of evidence. When you're looking towards the evidence, proving to you that either love does or doesn't exist, you have three concrete explanations on the side of the affirmative telling you, one, love exists physically in a scientific sense, right? That could be in the form of hormones when women are giving birth, in the form of neurological pathways being lit up. Second, in the sense of non-rationality. People make decisions based on love. And third, that people have literally told you in polls that they believe in love. On the negative side, the only evidence that's given to you is the idea of philosophers saying, no, actually a thing can't be like a tangible thing. It has to be like a mental thing that has no impact whatsoever. And then I go back to the definition of tangibility, telling you that love is tangible in the sense that if you're buying my opponent's argument on religion, love, first of all, has the same relationship component to it, but also it does have the same physiological component to it where we have proof of it existing, therefore it cannot be an ideology. Thank you.
Thank you. Both of you did an excellent job. Fantastic. We've been asked not to disclose. So I believe that means you will find out the results during the award ceremony in a couple hours. In the meantime, congratulations, both of you, on an absolutely fantastic gold medal round. It was amazing. You both did really well. It was a great final round. We'll go ahead and submit our ballots, and I wish you both the best of luck.
Good job, guys. Good luck.
Good job.